Changing Lanes, the official podcast of BMW. Welcome to this episode of Changing Lanes, the official podcast of BMW. My name is Jonathan.
And my name is Sarah.
And yes, this is the Changing Lanes podcast from BMW, but we want to be as open and objective as possible to give you the breakdown of the myths that need to be debunked so we have a better overview of what e-cars are really all about.
Yeah, maybe you think that electric cars are no fun, or that they're too expensive, or maybe even that they're dangerous somehow. And that's why today we're going to take a closer look at the hard facts, so we can dispel all those common myths that maybe even you, our podcast listener, may have all about e-cars.
Exactly. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. Let's debunk myth number one. Electric cars don't have a long enough range. Now, I gotta admit, when I first heard about e-cars, I thought the exact same thing. Well, they're good for, inner city driving, but, taking a road trip, that's out of the question. But I was actually totally misinformed. There are tons of half-truths making the rounds about the range of electric cars.
Although, Jonathan, let's be honest, when e-cars first came out, the range was not that long, but nowadays e-car batteries have been improved so much that you can drive long distances even with the air conditioner or seat heating on. Of course, the range still does depend on driver behavior. That is a fact, but the days of drivers stopping every 100 kilometers to recharge are long gone. In the near future, one charge will be able to cover up to around 600 kilometers. And, this clearly exceeds the daily needs of the average driver by far. I don't know.
Totally.
I don't drive 600 kilometers every day.
Neither do I, but you never know. So, for daily use and, relaxed weekend trips, for example, this is more than sufficient. I mean, it's even enough to go on vacation, right? So myth number one of e-cars don't have a long enough range. It's only true 30% of the time, and that number is getting smaller and smaller the more technology advances. All right, Sarah, what's the next myth we're going to debunk?
So myth number two is that it takes forever to charge an electric car.
This one comes up so many times.
It does. And yes, it is true that when plugged into a domestic power outlet, it can take a whole night for an empty electric car battery to fully charge. But with wall boxes, those are those powerful, permanently installed charging stations for the home and also fast charging technology. Jonathan, the charging time can be reduced way down. In most cases, it's only about 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. So that's like, the time it takes for a coffee break.
Exactly.
Nice. So I think the real topic isn't how long it takes to charge, but rather the optimization of charging. I mean, think about the infrastructure for a second. Yeah, it's still under development, but look around. Electric vehicle charging stations, they're popping up everywhere, and industry and energy suppliers are expanding their network every single day. There are 3 charging stations within a 5-block radius where I live, and I'm starting to see charging stations along the highway as well.
Yes, even wall boxes are becoming more common in apartment buildings and parking garages, and there's even a few wall boxes in my apartment building here in Berlin.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So this myth of it takes forever to charge an e-car is not really based in truth. It's an old myth that's no longer valid.
So myth debunked. All right.
Exactly.
The next myth that needs serious attention is this one. People are being exploited to make e-car batteries. Okay, a valid argument. So here's some background info. Raw materials are needed to produce battery cells. And yes, in some parts of the world, people are exploited to produce them, but there are tons of alternatives. For example, BMW has contracts with raw material suppliers that guarantee sustainable and fair production, and that is great news.
Yeah, and from this year, in fact, rare earth won't be used anymore. And the use of cobalt from Australia and Morocco is going to be reduced. Jonathan, BMW places a lot of importance on having control over its supply chain. Compliance with environmental standards and safeguarding human rights are their top priority.
Exactly. And, even improving the recyclability of batteries and finding ways to give them a second life is top on their to-do list. So this myth of people being exploited to make e-car batteries, well, at least from BMW's standpoint, it is 100% false.
Okay, moving on to myth number 4. And that is that batteries are e-cars' Achilles heel. It's sort of like saying the batteries of e-cars should be criticized more than the drive units in conventional cars. Well, this is maybe 50% true and 50% false, but there's no cause for concern. There isn't enough relevant data about the longevity of electric car batteries to even compare them to combustion engines.
Exactly. And, at the end of the day, no electric car driver needs to worry about durability. I mean, just think about it. The service life of a battery pack, it's specifically designed for the e-car it goes into. And as of January 2020, BMW guarantees its batteries for up to 8 years or 100,000 miles. Not bad.
I think what e-car owners need to remember is that fast charging puts a higher strain on batteries than conventional charging. But on the flip side, with an intelligent operating strategy, the life expectancy of batteries can actually be extended. So this myth is only 50% true, with that truth dwindling down even further in the future.
Okay, so our next myth is e-cars aren't better for the environment than combustion engines. And something you read a lot in Facebook comment sections, I know, but this is interesting because it's not really about the e-car themselves, but it's all about how the electricity is sourced for the e-car. Now, if the electricity comes from renewable energy, then day-to-day use has almost no impact on the environment, which is the goal, right? But if coal is used to produce the electricity, the footprint is, of course, bigger. But even if conventionally produced electricity is taken into account for the calculation and the burden of production is included, e-cars, they still come out ahead.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is battery production. CO2 is used to produce them, but even if conventionally produced electricity is taken into account, and so is the burden of production, e-cars still actually come out ahead. And there's even more good news. Since 2017, BMW has been minimizing CO2 production in Europe by buying electricity exclusively from renewable energy sources. So take the BMW i3, for example. It's produced using electricity solely from renewable sources.
Wow, that's amazing. And at the end of the day, an e-car's initial CO2 deficit following production is offset very quickly. Compared to a combustion engine car, an e-car generates 40,000 to 50,000 more environmentally neutral miles, depending on the calculation.
So this myth that e-cars aren't better for the environment than combustion vehicles is only 30% true.
Not bad.
Not bad.
With technology growing so rapidly, this myth could be completely debunked in just a matter of years.
Okay, now we move on to myth number 6, and it plays a big factor in deciding to switch over to e-mobility. And that myth is electric cars are more expensive than combustion engine vehicles.
Ooh, this is a good one.
Yes. So in a nutshell, the longer an e-car is on the road, the better its cost impact. BMW's latest calculations show that an electric car is financially superior to a combustion engine vehicle from a mileage of between 60,000 to 100,000 miles.
Ah, okay. And does that include purchase, maintenance, and operation?
Yeah, it includes all of that.
Sweet. Awesome.
Yeah, and once this point is reached, the expense of producing the electric vehicle battery is offset. And, Jonathan, here's even more good news.
Ooh.
Even before reaching 60,000 miles, the positive financial aspect will outweigh the negative in the future as the production of e-cars increases and, in turn, production costs fall. So the more e-cars that are produced, the less they'll cost.
Ooh, that is good news, Sarah. And, something to be considered as well is maintenance. Those costs in an e-car are way lower than in a diesel or a gas car, for example. No oil changes, no checking of timing chains and belts. I mean, the savings really add up over time. And because an e-car has fewer moving parts than a combustion engine does, there's less wear and tear.
And one last thing is the cost of charging.
Oh, yeah, that too.
High charging costs are a thing of the past. Needs-based rate plans and intelligent charging functions mean that recharging an electric car has never been easier and cheaper. And honestly, electricity is still cheaper than gas or diesel, so it's a no-brainer.
Exactly. Woohoo! All right, so the myth of e-cars are more expensive than combustion engine vehicles is only about 40% true.
Yeah, Jonathan, when I first learned that electricity is cheaper than gas, that's what converted me.
Yeah, me too. All right, so moving on to myth number 7, electric cars are dangerous. All right, okay, I get it. Anytime a new technology comes out, everyone looks at it skeptically, asking, is it safe? Can I trust it? And then some Hollywood filmmaker has the genius idea to have an e-car exploding in the background, and everyone believes that e-cars are not safe. Guys, come on. In real life, e-cars are not dangerous.
I mean, e-cars are just as safe as combustion engine vehicles. Think about it. It wouldn't be legal to sell them or drive them on the road, right? Also, there are a number of systems that are installed to ensure their safety. Yes, if an accident were to happen, then there's a system on board that actually shuts off the battery immediately, so there's no risk of electric shock to anyone or anything.
I mean, it sounds like everything has been thought of in advance, right?
Yes, it has all been thought of and implemented as well. I mean, they have to.
Exactly. And, one other thing that I think is cool is that e-cars are quieter than combustion engine cars when they drive at slower speeds. And this is kind of great because it reduces noise pollution in cities, but it's also dangerous because you can't hear the car approaching. So what manufacturers have done is something super cool. In order to ensure that pedestrians hear the e-cars at lower speeds, they produced a sound, an artificial sound at speeds of less than 10 miles per hour. So even the BMW i3 makes this artificial noise at speeds up to 20 miles per hour. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And as the car accelerates, this artificial sound, it fades away. So when the car travels faster, it makes its own sound by the tires on the pavement so everyone can hear them coming.
So as you can see, the accuracy of this myth of e-cars being dangerous is 0%. Myth debunked.
Yes, myth debunked.
Okay, our 8th myth is that e-cars overload the power grid. Now, this is one of the biggest myths out there. The idea that power grids can't handle supplying electricity to all electric vehicles if everyone switches to e-cars. But quite honestly, it's not like we're all going to switch to e-cars overnight and max out the power grid, so we can all just chill out for a bit.
Exactly. And, even if we all did run out and got an e-car tomorrow, still there's hope when it comes to the infrastructure. If more charging stations are popping up, then it's a great opportunity to fix all ailing electric grids. E-cars store energy, right? So this could potentially be pumped back into the grid when needed. It's all about optimizing charging times. If e-cars charge slowly during the day, then solar harvesting can be ramped up. If e-cars charge at night, the same can be done with wind harvesting.
So you could say, as the e-car infrastructure grows, the grid can be updated to better supply the energy needs of the future.
Exactly, Sarah.
And that's why this myth of e-cars will overload the power grid isn't really true. Yes, energy will be needed, but it will be organized in a way that benefits everyone.
Sounds wonderful. All right. The second to last myth that needs some serious looking at is electric cars are just a stopgap solution.
Yeah, this is a big one, especially for people like my parents. They grew up on combustion engine cars, and they do have a hard time wrapping their heads around electric mobility.
Exactly, mine too. But, in all honesty, it seems inevitable that the era of combustion engine cars will come to an end sometime in the future. And that's not because of the finite nature of oil resources. Alternative drive technologies are really the only option to protect the environment and the climate. And currently, we can't predict whether BEVs or FCVs will dominate the market, but what is sure is that fully electric vehicles will play a major role in the future.
Definitely. Think about it. They are the only way we can reach lower CO2 emissions on a global scale. So there's definitely going to be a mix of different types of drive systems out there. We just have to be open to them and see where the future leads us. Regardless of which form they take, electric vehicles are the cars of the future.
Amen. And with that, the myth of e-cars are just a stopgap solution, it's debunked. E-cars are the future.
Indeed. All right, last but not least, the final myth that we are here to debunk about e-cars is e-cars are no fun to drive.
Seriously?
Yeah, I know, right? Come on, guys. Have you ever been in an electric car? It's awesome. It's super fun.
I know. Just think about the gas pedal. You can't call it a gas pedal anymore because there's no gas. How cool is that? There's nothing like taking off at a smooth and almost silent glide. It feels effortless.
Exactly. And unlike a combustion engine vehicle, which has to reach a certain RPM to really get going, e-cars get full torque immediately. So if you ever want to win the red light challenge of being the fastest after that red light turns green, then you'd better be driving an e-car.
Exactly. And, cornering is a piece of cake as well. The reason being is that the battery and their weight are located in the undercarriage. And with that low center of gravity, you can really hug the road.
Jonathan, how do you really define driving pleasure? That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Smoothly gliding through the countryside, knowing that you're saving money and doing your part to save the environment. Now, that is a whole new driving experience.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So the myth of e-cars are no fun to drive is a total myth. It's absolutely ridiculous and is not based in reality. Myth debunked.
Myth debunked, yes.
And there you have it, the top 10 myths about e-cars and the truth behind them. Jonathan, one thing that I remember about driving an e-car for the first time and finding it just such an amazing and very different experience was it was way back when there was still Drive Now that BMW was a part of. Do you remember that car sharing? Yeah, and now it's called something else. But and I just remember getting in there and this sort of silent, smooth, effortless acceleration of the car. It really almost felt like you're flying through the streets.
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, this is the future of driving for sure.
Amazing. Wow. For me, it was knowing that it's environmentally friendly. We all know that we're trying to do our best to save the environment. And I think when you get behind an e-car, you automatically feel like, oh, I'm getting to where I need to be. I don't have to feel guilty by using diesel or gas. And I'm actually helping the environment by driving an e-car. So that makes it, like you said before, a totally different driving experience. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So driving pleasure and driving with responsibility
exactly.
for the environment.
Yeah.
So no matter what myth we debunked that made you change your mind about e-cars, we're glad that you tuned in. And who knows, next time you hear an e-car myth come up in conversation, now you know the truth of the matter and can add your 2 cents to the conversation.
I know I will.
Me too.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of Changing Lanes.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to our podcast for future episodes.
And to dive deeper into all things BMW, head on over to bmw.com to learn more.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this has been Changing Lanes.
See you next time.